Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you all for my session at Testing Stage 2023. And my topic is about API test automation without code. I guess this is one of the most relevant topic in the present technological changes and the innovations that is happening in this industry. Before moving ahead, let me introduce myself. I am Sowmya Sridharamurthy. I work as Engineering Manager of Quality at Lifecycle. I'm currently based out of Netherlands and I'm in this role for last 16 years. I'm passionate about accessibility and I am also an accessibility advocate, which means I help development teams in guiding and mentoring and adopting those accessibility guidelines for inclusive development. I'm an active mentor in various platforms. I'm also be recognized as by various communities like pCloudy Change Leader, Browser Stack Champion, Postman Supernova, etc. You can find me in my social handles if you would love to connect. And then that's my website. I keep posting articles about testing, test engineering, test automation, careers, and everything about it. So please do have a look and leave a comment if you would like to see something very specific. So before we move ahead, I would like to set the right tone of the importance and impact of the API in the present technological trend. Internet space has become busy than ever before. There are millions of applications out there being launched every day and zillions of customers using multiple applications day in and out, sending requests and waiting for the responses being processed. There are umpteen number of mobile applications and web applications serving zillions of customers day in, day out. Pick any 1 minute of the randomly out of a day, and you pretty much can see so many activities happening within that 1 minute. And I have taken only the most popular applications out there that we easily recognize. There are like 200,000 tweets going across in a minute, 33 million snaps being created, 695,000 stories being shared on Instagram. So this is amazing how these things is being processed in the industry. And it always intrigues, like, how is this even possible? What are the driving force behind achieving these technological trend and these innovations in the market? And we can only see this trend going upward. You do not see this trend going to stop at any point in time in the near future. Now, let us quickly look at the digital trend in this industry. So, there are many technological innovations happening and is not restricted to what is present in this slide. However, day in, day out, you get to hear these keywords buzzing around in every space, in every social media, in every YouTube videos that you get to see. Digital transformations are gaining a huge traction, and thanks to the COVID, which put many brick and mortar companies to look towards the internet and build their space or presence there. Super apps, which is gaining a huge traction in some part of the world, especially towards Asia and Middle Eastern countries. It's a great platform for multiple applications to interact with each other and provide one-stop solution for the customers. Then the iPaaS solutions, which provide a great ability to automate stuff. Things like RPCs and hyper automations are making use of these iPaaS solutions to help co-create things instead of having to create everything from the scratch, like building everything ground up. Financial operations, you can see it's taking by surprise how banking and trading operations are changing on a day-to-day basis. One example of introduction of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain itself is revolutionary. The metaverse, needless to say, there are many companies who have pounced already on this concept of making use of metaverse in their respective businesses and to leverage in some way to drive growth and drive technological innovations with their respective solutions. It is amazing to see how things are changing in the technological space, which also means this space is becoming more complex on a day-to-day basis. But has it ever occurred to you, what is that one driving force which is enabling all these businesses to achieve these innovations at this speed? Well, it is none other than the hero of this session, which is the API. Application programming interfaces are making a huge noise in the technological space, and this is here to grow and this is here to stay. No matter what role one is into, if you are in the software space, it is important that you interact with the API either directly or indirectly, because this is becoming the future trend and they are the promising drivers of all these innovations that we have been talking about for the last 5 minutes. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. For the benefit of those who have come across this term for the very first time, I would like to set a basic understanding here. APIs are nothing but application programming interface, and they work around a specific protocol. Why is this important? Is we have plethora of programming languages, and each company may be using their own set of programming languages. For example, a company A and a company B. Company A may use Java, company B may use C#, but they would like to integrate their applications with each other if they have to. Now, with the two different programming languages, with two different behavior, it gets more challenging. But API is programming language agnostic. No matter in which programming language you write, as long as you adhere to the protocols and the template of the response body, it gives you a good opportunity for these two businesses to co-create or integrate their APIs to build the solution. So that's the advantage of having APIs at the very basic level. Then APIs pretty much follow the client-server model, and they are also triggered through an endpoint. Now, moving ahead, this is the basic elements that's involved in any API, no matter what API you take. This is a holistic view. It is not limited to this, but pretty much you can see these basic elements available in every API. So by and large, it's divided into request and a response. An API request may have multiple aspects in it. It starts with a verb or a method, which basically say what this API is supposed to do. A get means just a read operation. You read into a DB, fetch the value out of somewhere, and then give it as in the form of a response. A post, a put operations are mostly like changing the details or the data, updating and creating a data in the database, or changing a data somewhere. So it can be a critical action. So when performing the post, put, or any of these crude operations, we have to be very careful. So that is what verb is. Then you have headers. When two applications or two APIs have to interact with each other, they have to ensure that they are authenticated and they are safe to interact. These details are stored in these headers. Authorization is to let know the person who's performing this action is the right person and he's allowed to do. That is authorization. Then in order to trigger any of these APIs, you have to call its endpoint. So you can see the entire URL can be divided into two parts. It can be more than this, but a simple API call can have a base URL and then an endpoint. It's more or less like having a house address where this particular API sits. So when you call this API with the relevant information, it gets triggered and perform the action that you request them to do. Then is a response. Once you send the request, it is supposed to perform a specific set of actions and send you back a response. A response is a must. Even if it is an error, it has to give you a clarity on why it failed or why it is not allowed to perform a certain actions. That comes as a part of your response. Now, this response by and large is divided into two parts. One is a status and the one is a body. Now, with the time limitation, I will not be able to dive too deep into all aspects of status and the response body and its format and all of its stuff. I highly recommend you to go through some basic materials online to understand all these details. But this should give you a good starting point to understand the structure of an API, the aspects and the elements that is involved in it when you have to work with it or understand it during your testing process. Now, let us come to the most meaty part of our discussion, where I have been asked multiple times, Sowmya, we already have UI automation. Why should I be investing a lot of time into API test automation? I am a Scrum test engineer and I don't have enough time to invest into API testing. Let me tell you something. We all have been through this curve and still being worried about the test being flaky and the confidence ratio being absolutely zero when you're in the UI test automation. I wouldn't generalize it, but most testing team already are facing this problem. Doing the API testing will help you set up more stable tests. you're more closer to the code, which helps to find the bug at its source. The tests run more reliably and more faster, and you can do it a unit level test and also chain multiple APIs to achieve the same output as you're trying to achieve in the UI. But in this case, the confidence ratio is much higher. I know API tests can get a little dry, a little technical in its nature, but that is why this session is about, that not everybody have to go through a huge learning curve of learning a programming language right from the scratch. There are many low code, no code tools out there in the market which can help you adopt API testing as quick as possible without having to reach the demand of learning an entire programming language upside down, right? So now, having said that, again, we have to be mindful in using the low code, no code solution because they are evolving. They have still not reached a maturity where you can do ultimately anything out of them. But instead of having nothing, you can start at some point and keep adding more tests, which can be more reliable, which can be more stable, and help you achieve a better testing routine as compared to a flaky test routine with a zero test confidence. So in my future slides, it will not be slides anyways, in my next a few minutes, I will be showing you a hands-on on how a low-code tool can be implemented as part of your test routine easily without having to worry about learning an entire programming language to achieve an API testing. So in today's session, I will be walking you through one of the low-code, no-code tools that I use on a daily basis to do API testing. I have also helped many people to onboard into API testing making use of this tool. Now, you don't have to restrict yourself for this tool. This is just an example. There are plethora of tools available in the market. Scan and search something that intrigues you or interests you and start your journey of API testing from there. The whole idea is to motivate the test engineering team to adopt API testing as a mainstream testing agenda as over to the UI automation so that you can deal with a more reliable and better testing pattern and test approaches. The visual that you're seeing on your screen is called a flow. So this is a low-code, no-code feature provided by Postman. I guess we already know Postman. For those of you who have not worked on this tool or have not come across this tool in the past, so this is a tool that can be actively used in your usual API lifecycle for the development, maintenance, documentation, testing, and all that sorts of the purposes. And Flow is a new feature that's been released. Before I jump into building this flow, it is important that you understand some basic information about these blocks. The first thing is everything in this flow is driven through these blocks, which means you don't really have to get into understanding every programming setup behind these blocks. You simply can call these blocks, fill in the details that you're looking for, and keep building the user scenarios. The second thing is to make these flows work, it is important that you save examples in each of these APIs. Now, if you have not done this before, not to worry, and I'm here to display that in the session. So let me start by first creating a collection. In Postman tool, first thing you need to create is a collection before you start working on any of APIs, sending requests or dealing with the documentation or anything. It just makes your work a lot more simple and put together. So let me create a simple collection and I will name it as Testing Stage 2023. And this is the place which holds all the APIs that I will be working in today's session. Now, once I create this, I can add any request. Now, this is my public workspace, which means anyone who has this URL will be able to reach this space and look at these APIs. I have some fun APIs which can be used for testing purpose. Let me use this, which is an API which triggers this endpoint to get the origin of a name and the probability of that name's usage in that particular country. Now, before I start explaining everything theoretically, let me change this name to Tom and trigger this API to see what happens. So when you execute it, response body, you can see, is a list which contains a key value pair of country ID and the probability. It's like in which country you can see in what probability of its usage. This is nothing serious, just a fun. So maybe we can use it for our learning the testing. Now, once you trigger this API and understand the response body, you can save it as an example. This is the very basic requirement for the flow to work. So let's save as an example. And then you can give any name, but I will save it as a success because this is a success scenario for me as it returns a response body. And then once I have this set up, let me save this API. It's a part of a collection called Testing Stage 2023. We have an API, a working API, and an example. This is a basic requirement for the flow to work, and we have set this up. Let me go to flows. And here you can see all the previous flows that I've created. If you're doing it for the first time, you may see everything empty. Just click on this plus button, which says to create a new flow. And when you do it, it loads an empty canvas where you can create your flow, everything from the scratch. Let me name this first for my reference. And then this is the start block, which is self-explanatory that the execution of the API starts from this block, which is going to trigger be it a send request or loop through or evaluate or anything. Now, before I move ahead, this is the second basic information that you have to understand. Like I already mentioned, everything in flow works as a block. So it's lifting up the responsibility of you to understand every programming construct that goes behind this block. As long as you know when and how to use this block, you're good to go. So first thing I have to do is to trigger this API. So let me do that. When I add this block, you pretty much can see it's giving me few key elements here. The first one is a place where I can key in the request I want to send. And then if there is a specific environment or the variables that you're using to execute your API, you pretty much can use it. And also the response body type, it automatically detects. However, for my reason, I'll just set it as JSON. Let me add the API of my interest, which is in the collection called Testing Stage 2023. I go in to find my API of interest and I choose here. So you pretty much can see it gets added. So just to build up curiosity, let's see what happens when I click on start or run. Well, something happened, but we don't know what is happening, isn't it? So let's build more information about what this block is doing by adding one more block called output. Now this block helps you to see every response that comes from the previous block. So let me run and then explain things further. So as you can see, it has given you the response body with the header details and everything. The same thing that we saw as a part of the response body while we triggered API a few minutes ago, the same details, you can see it here. So you can keep it as a reference. One other thing to note here is this is an input port and these are the output ports. Input ports receives information to make that block work, and output port is the one which gives you a processed information that you want to take it further to build your user scenarios. Now that's understood. Well, now I have the output. It is pretty much understood. This is what I'll be working with. But before we start working with any API for testing, we have to build a map about what we are trying to achieve with this API. Now my API here is the one which triggers to give me a key value pair of country and a probability of its usage. Most probably what I am thinking to do in today's session is read the body, pick the country, and if it is matching to a US, then I want to output it. If it is not, then I just want to log it into the console. That's exactly what I want to do. So let's see how to build this. Let me widen this canvas just so I can have a view. So now you can see This is the response body that we receive. And in the response, the key value pair of country and probability is within a list called country, which rests within the body. So I have to reach a body first and then make my way to the country to get access to this list. Well, let's start building that. To do it, let me first access the body, which happens through a block called select. The name itself specifies you have to select something. And the best part about this flow is it's going to show you already the structure of the response so that you simply can choose what you're interested in. Now you have the hang of the body. Now, just to keep your curiosity in, let's output to see if this is giving me just the body and not the headers. Cool. You see, I just received the body with this list. The next thing I want to achieve is to reach this country. Well, let me remove this block and take that as an input for my next block to select and choose country, because this is the one which is having that list. I guess I have reached the spot where I want to build an if-else statement. But before I assume, let me output it to a block and ensure I have done the right thing. Voila. Yes, I guess I have got what I'm looking for. So I have the entire list which I can loop through. So whenever you see it's the same structure of details being repeated over and again, the simplest thing we do is loop over these details and apply the conditions that we would like to achieve. So let's start building that. If I have to go through a list of array, the simple thing I have to do is to enter a for loop, which is already present for you. Just go in there. What this does is takes one key value pair at a time and outputs it for you to perform any action that's in your mind. And in my case, I want to evaluate something. What is it I want to evaluate? I want to evaluate country ID, right? So how? So in my list, I have a country ID and a probability, both being passed. But I'm interested only in country ID, which I'm storing in a variable called value1. What I want is value1 to be equal to US. Yeah, if it is equal to US, I want to do something. If it's US, I want to output it and see if it is coming here. Let's run this flow and see what we have built until now. So when I run, well, it looped through. It was pretty quick, isn't it? So it looped through all the output in the response to check if there was a US entry. It wasn't, and then it showed me false. So let's go through just to ensure our result is right. Yeah, CZ, IE, MQ, BE, and well, GB. There is no US. Now, just to be more curious, what happens if I give a working detail? Ideally, it should turn to true. Let's check. When I run that, yes, this flow is working. So you can call a respective blocks, key in the details that you want to process and achieve. So this is the beauty of working with flow, where the learning curve is not as steep as picking up a new programming language. In real life scenarios, we may have more complex situations where we may have to deal with authorizations and variables concepts. Let me walk you through a very simple example where I'm making use of both of these, where I create an API for the Postman API key for a Postman API, and then create a variable where I can place this API key, call it in my API calls securely, and then build a flow out of it. So let's get started with that. I have a collection called Postman API, which basically have a bunch of these APIs. Here you can see it creates a collection. It gets a specific collection from your workspace, and then it updates a collection, deletes a collection. These are like a set of APIs which performs an individual functions when it is triggered. And I am ready with my API key. You're not allowed to show this, but anyways, I'm going to delete this after this session. So just to let you know how you can save it as a part of your environment variable, you can keep an API key here. Then go to any of your collection, and then in the authorizations you can see you can make use of this variable within the 2 flower brackets. So the API name that you use should be exactly matching what you use here in the environment variable so that it refers to this. So why we need authorization? It's a concept where you're allowing the right users to perform right actions and not allowing everybody, any Tom, Dick and Harry, to come and perform any actions on your DB. You really don't want that, right? It is mostly related to the security issues. So you need an API key to tell, okay, the person who's performing this is authorized to do it. So now I am letting my collection know I am the authorized person to change or create a collection in my workspace by providing this information, which is great. Now the next thing I have is to build a flow and see what I can make out of it. When I go to the flow, I have created a very simple and a fun one. So like if I run this, you can see the counter keeps running. Here I'm trying to get the number of collections I already have, and then on success I'm trying to create a new collection and check the count again. You can see if a new collection is created, this counter keeps running until I hit a stop. So let's get started. Let me create a new canvas in here, which is great. Let me expand that. So the first thing I have to do is to get all the collections that I have in my workspace. So let me go to the collection and choose the API that I'm interested in, which is get all collections, which is in here. I also need to add my environment because I'm making use of an API key, which is a variable. So I'm using that. You can see it gets added automatically, which is great. Now, once we have this send request, well, we're interested to see what's coming out of it. So let's output it just to ensure that we are receiving what we are looking forward for. Yes, we are. You see, I have 207 items when I started this flow, right? So when I go to, when it is a success, I basically have to select the body and then evaluate the value 1 for the collections that I have. Basically what I need is a count of collections that I already have, and to achieve this I use a FQL, which is called flow query language. When you hit a dollar symbol, you already see what's available options are. What I need is a count of the number of collections that I have already, so which is stored in a variable called value 1 in my scenario. So I do that. So the idea here is it should give me the total count of the collections that I have, and once I have it, I would like to output it. When I do that, hopefully this should work. Let's see. So I'm executing this call and you see it gives me 207, which is the right number when I start this flow. Cool. So when it is a success scenario, the other thing I want to do is to create a new collection, which is possible, of course, by sending a request. And we send the request making use of a send block. So I do that. And this time I want to create a collection. To do that, let me call the endpoint which creates it. That's a post request. You see all these details are automatically getting added. I'm interested in JSON format. Let's keep it. The environment is getting added automatically, which is great. So now let's see if a new collection is getting created just because I'm calling create collection here. So when I run, yes. So in the body, you see I get a key value pair of a new ID, the name of a collection, and the UID of that collection. This still remains the same because this executes in parallel with the previous request, which is a post request. So because it's running in parallel, it doesn't take the new count. To make that happen, the simple thing I have to do is take the output of this and make an input of it. Cool. This is how I build, and you can see how the counter keeps running. It's a moment of truth. Let's see if it's gonna work. I'll do that. When I click run, you see the collection number keeps getting added up because there is a new collection that is generated on every call, and the counter keeps running. This is an infinite loop. It keeps running unless you make a choice to stop. So there are so many fun ways that you can make use of flows into your usual automation routine, and have a little fun, and also make your testing routine a little more stable as you're more near to the source code. Now, let me answer a few questions in this. So you may have a question: Can I link more than one block for an output port? Yeah, sure, you can, as many you want. And if the flow is right, or if this connection you're trying to establish makes sense, then it will definitely work. If there is an error, you pretty much can see the block will not be triggered, which is great. Now, and in the real world scenario, everything that is required for an API, like making use of authentication concepts or security, delays, for loop, everything is already available for you in the format of a block, which saves a lot of time. And you don't have to really run around to write everything from the scratch. Now, just to expand this, I can do one other thing. I'll just remove all of it and build maybe another flow. So in this case, I have entered the environment, so it is running, and this environment have my API key, which authorizes me to execute this API. But what happens if I do not key in this environment? And I'll say update all. So just for a curiosity, let's put an output block and see what happens here. We're not receiving anything in the output block. That's surprising. Well, it's behaving as it's expected. Why? Because you see, it is not a success because I'm not passing or authorizing myself. You can see something being added in the output block of a failure. And when I run that, you see there is something that's coming here with an error, which shows an authentication error, which is cool. And if you want to build the negative scenario flows, like for both a success and a failure, you can make use of both these ports and build your test scenarios accordingly to check both the use cases without having to or compromise one over the other. The other beauty of this output is you can see this output in any format. As you see, they have given you quite a few options in here. You can see it as a JSON, as a markdown URL, YouTube videos, or any of these things, provided the output data that you're generating is suffices or supports this format. And then you definitely can make use of these things to make it a little more visually appealing. Now, in my case, if I'm interested to see the same details in the table, I simply can do that, and everything that comes out as a response body will be displayed as a table. If you are a person who would love to see the details as a part of the table, you can see that. Or if you're the one who would love to see it as a part of a JSON, you can do that too. So there's a lot to play around and have a great time making use of flows. So I highly recommend spend some time in acquainting yourself with the Postman flows. If you don't have a user, create a new user. It's absolutely free. Just go to postman.com, create your own user, and then start playing around. It is super fun, and also something that's great to be included in your usual test automation. So after our flows and hands-on part, I would like to show the API platform landscape. No API discussion goes complete without the mentioning of API lifecycle, API versioning, and API maintenance. It is very important. There are many moving parts when it comes to an API lifecycle. It can get overwhelming when you see it the first time, but I highly recommend start small at some point and start gathering information and build your way up. It is very important to have a good hold and understanding about API and API lifecycle that will help you to build a better test regime. So here we are at the end of our session. Thank you so much for sticking through, listening to me, and giving me an opportunity to show you how you can make use of a low-code, no-code tools like Postman into your daily test routines to do API testing. If you are not into API testing already, I highly recommend invest time in learning because APIs are redefining the future. All future innovations and present technologies are driven by APIs. These are here to stay. Having said that, I guess we can take a little time for the question and answers if you have any. Again, thank you